The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
The severed head was not there. There wasn't, I should say, hardly any blood spatter.
You can start seeing the blood on the bed, blood stains. And when we get closer, or at least when I got closer, you could have that chemical smell that started burning your nose and your eyes.
Blood, a bed, and a missing head. We're talking about the Love Triangle Beheading Trial for a former porn star, Devyn Michaels. Plus, ex-NFL star Antonio Brown released on bail as he faces an attempted murder charge. We're going to get into his defense strategy this morning and a closer look at Lindsay Clancy, the Massachusetts mother who allegedly killed her 3 kids, will appear physically for the first time in court. Also, this hour, the troubled son who is accused of stabbing his parents to death. Will Dima Tower's mental state tip the scales? It's all next, right here on Opening Statements. Good morning and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Ted Rollins in again for Julie Grant. Fear not, she'll be back on Monday. We are getting ready for a busy day in courtrooms across the country. They're back at it in Vegas this morning for more testimony of that former porn star murder trial, the beheading. The young man from Ukraine breaking down yesterday in a Florida courtroom. How is that going to affect his case, if at all? We'll talk about that as well. Antonio Brown, lots to get to. Let's start the day, as we always do, with a look at the daily docket.
I just excused the jury. It got to the point where the defendant, in crying and using Kleenex, was disrupting the jury trial. Mr. Tower, I won't allow that to continue, so take a moment, compose yourself, and we'll get started in about 5 or so minutes, okay?
In Florida, the adopted son murder trial for Dima Tower continues this morning. He's accused of brutally murdering his parents, Jennifer and Robbie Tower. Testimony starts 11 o'clock Eastern time. We'll definitely be dipping into that one today. In Kentucky, we have the sentencing for defendant Elena Barden. She's a former teacher accused of trying to convince an incarcerated teen to kill her husband. Barden was acquitted of solicitation of murder, but she was convicted of sexual abuse. That begins 8:30 a.m. And in Nevada, the Love Triangle Beheading Trial for defendant Devyn Michaels resumes 2 o'clock Eastern time. That's where we're going to begin the hour, as we did yesterday as well. This is such a compelling case. It's bizarre. It's disgusting on many levels. The lead detective took the stand yesterday and talked about the murder scene. Talk about gruesome. The former porn star is accused of bludgeoning and beheading her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Willett, in this weird love triangle. Remember, she's married to the victim's son. His name's Devyn. That's from previous marriage, of course. The defense is saying that Devyn did it. Here is Detective Dennis Ozawa detailing what he saw when he walked into that crime scene.
You can see the bed, you can see the blankets. You can't see him yet, and you don't see him or his body until you get closer to the front of it, of the bed, and then you start to wrap around. Then at that point, you can start seeing the blood on the bed, blood stains, and then blood next to the bed at that point. And then when we get closer, or at least when I got closer, you could have that chemical smell that started burning your nose and your eyes at that time. We also noticed that there wasn't any blood spatter on the walls or on the ceiling. Just given the type of injury that we were seeing, you expect to probably see a little bit more blood in other places. And then just through that quick brief walkthrough, I didn't see any weapons or any devices that were believed to be used that would have severed his head off at that time.
Yeah, no knife, no saw. They needed a saw. It's a power saw. The ME determined in this case because of the cut on the head. It's 8 a.m. and we're talking about severed heads. Well, let's bring in a couple guys that don't mind. Criminal defense attorney Michael J. Brown and criminal defense and civil attorney John Phillips. All right, Michael, this case, you have the lead detective on the stand yesterday saying there's no blood spat. I mean, you could imagine what you would think a crime scene would look like after someone's head was dismembered. That's not what it looks like. Does that create inherent reasonable doubt of, wait a minute, they don't know how this happened or where it happened?
Good morning, Ted. Good morning, John. I love the segue. Listen, I don't think that matters, Ted. You know, where it happened. The bottom line is it's about who did it, and we have a dead person, and that's really what the ultimate issue is. And I know there's a lot of questions about how the actual death happened, because it appears to be after the death, the individual was beheaded. But again, that's insignificant. I think they have a very strong case against the perpetrator, who is the defendant in this case, and we obviously have a decedent. So I think that's ultimately what's important. That body may not have been killed at that location. As you indicated, there's no blood spatter, so there's no cast off as we know it, and it may have been moved from another location to the bed. Nevertheless, we have a dead person, and we have a very strong case against the defendant.
John, could the defense, we know the defense strategy is the boy did it, that he was mad that his dad was going to come back and take his woman. That's the theory. Does the crime scene help with their theory? Like, you know, to argue with a straight face in the clothes, it wasn't, you know, we don't know where the murder happened, and he has power tools. What's your take?
The defense is going to latch on to that whole thing that they just don't have the murder weapon. They just want this to be a trial about, you know, morality, and the prosecutors don't have a case. But hold on a second, like, not so fast, as Lee Corso would say. You have all of the forensics. Like, people just don't understand how powerful not only cell phone data is, GPS tracking, but what we drive in our cars. You know, the computer system in our cars log data as well. And so, you know, they have all of that to track what happened. They are missing some pieces. And certainly, you know, those of us that haven't followed this case up close for years don't know a lot of those pieces yet, but they're rolling them out day by day.
Yeah, let's look at that evidence against Devyn, the porn star, the ex-porn star. There's a mountain of it, and here's a timeline of what has been established using what you're talking, the phones, the car, the Nissan computer. 10 o'clock, victim's phone is last recording. Then 11:30 p.m., victim's phone again hits a cell tower. Fast forward 2 a.m., 2:04, Devyn's Nissan Armada, her phone, and the victim's phone all leave the murder scene. That's huge. So she's in the car with her phone and with the victim's phone, and then boom, she gets picked up at the CVS pharmacy. Solo female driver confirmed in that Armada via surveillance, and then again it shows surveillance with this vehicle. The bottom line here, Michael, is that she's involved, right? And does a jury care at the end of the day if maybe the son helped her with the power tools or the body?
Well, they may care, but that's a separate prosecution, and I don't think that's going to happen. The prosecutor actually had him testify, meaning the son. But Ted, remember, in addition to the things you've just pointed out, you also have surveillance video immediately before the murder of the victim and the defendant. And then you have the defendant leaving the murder scene after the alleged murder because they have that window from around 10 to 2 a.m. And, of course, you don't want to forget about the fact that she made a alleged confession about causing contact, hitting him in the head. So they have a really solid case. And then the piece de resistance, if you want to use that term, is you have her DNA on this bag where a lot of his personal effects are tied up. Her DNA is on that knot, and the defendant's and the victim's DNA apparently is on her phone. So they got to have a pretty strong case here.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was some testimony from the lead detective that at some point, Devyn, the defendant here, she told them about this weird story. She was approached at the Burlington coat factory by a mystery man who said, "I'm going to get you." Let's take a listen to that.
We asked if she was willing to meet. She said yes. and then we were going to head up to her place. During that conversation, she had mentioned that one of her daughters had actually told her that while they were school shopping at the Burlington Coat Factory, somebody had a male had approached the daughter. I can't remember which one it was, but a male had approached the daughter and Jonathan at the Burlington Coat Factory and made the comment, I believe, "I'm coming to get you."
John, classic defendant trying to create some bizarro story. Ooh, I just want to let you guys know this, investigators. And juries see through that, right?
Jurors see through that. You know, the old expression, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, unless, you know, this case is totally fit for Las Vegas. You know, porn stars, father, son, you know, dating your stepson kind of thing. But I think the jury's going to see through it pretty clearly that this is just, you know, there's so many puns and analogies that I think are just too inappropriate before 8:15 a.m. But it's a crazy one. It's a crazy one.
Yeah, and Michael, you know, for people that don't know that, you know, Clark County, the jury pool, you would think they're a bunch of Vegas crazy. No, these are people that live there and are sort of disgusted by a version of what goes on there. They're remarkably conservative. Just asked OJ. This isn't going to fly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a script that none of us can write. But at the end of the day, I think the evidence is overwhelming. They have everything they could possibly want, other than maybe a recorded confession by the defendant. And I understand the defense is doing the best they can, and they are pointing the finger and trying to deflect the blame to the son. But I think the evidence is overwhelming against the defendant, and I think at the end of the day, the jury's going to convict her.
Yeah, and they'll be back at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be monitoring that and talking about whatever transpires today as the defense or the state continues to roll out their case. We'll get a break. When we come back, ex-NFL star Antonio Brown. Boy, if you're a football fan, this guy was unbelievable on the field. Dominant receiver. Now, he's out on bond, but he's facing an attempted murder charge. He's claiming self-defense. Our power panel's going to weigh in. Plus,
we all know that this woman is, as counsel concedes apparently, a danger to herself. I question whether she would ever make it to a trial. She's suicidal.
The Massachusetts mother accused of killing her 3 young children. Due in court soon. This will be the first time we'll see the defendant physically. We'll break down this case, a horrible case against Lindsay Clancy.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Antonio Brown, trending in true crime, former NFL great. He faces serious legal trouble in South Florida, a far cry from his glory days. That was Antonio Brown in his heyday when he was on the cover of Madden 19, released back in 2018. This is the 37-year-old now, the former wide receiver, facing a top count of attempted murder. He appeared via Zoom in a courtroom on Wednesday after he was released. After the hearing, he was released on $25,000 bond with a GPS monitor. All of this is in connection to a shooting incident in Miami earlier this year. It was caught on video. Everybody had their phones out and were recording this. Brown fired 2 shots, which the victim claims one of the bullets grazed his neck. We're going to break down the incident in just a moment, but first, reaction to that bond, and he is out with the ankle monitor. Here to discuss criminal defense and civil attorney John Phillips, sports law attorney Dan Lust, and former NFL quarterback Charlie Batch. Charlie, I want to start with you and just talk about the impact that Antonio Brown had on the league. From a fan standpoint, he was something else. As an NFL insider and Pittsburgh Steeler insider, talk about this guy and how he changed the game in his heyday.
Yeah, this guy was unbelievable. And, I played with him for 3 seasons from 2010 to 2012. And to see him work on his craft, just to be, proving to people that he can play in this league, it was impressive by itself. But ultimately, when he had the chance to now earn that wide receiver #1 position, he probably had arguably one of the best 5 to 6 year stretches in the history of the NFL. And he earned all of that respect because of the work that he put into it. So he was fierce on the field, and he was probably one of the most feared guys of the 2010 decade.
Dan, he seemed to come a bit unhinged. Went to the Raiders, never played there, and ended up at Tampa. But there was something going on. What's your take in terms of your observation of his trajectory and sort of downfall?
Yeah, certainly. And obviously none of this is confirmed, but there's certainly a prevailing we'll say sentiment that Brown's career was derailed by head injuries, multiple head injuries that started in Pittsburgh and really derailed his career. And as Charlie mentioned, I think everyone would be in agreement that Antonio Brown was a consensus first ballot Hall of Famer until he left Pittsburgh. And these, again, not that there is a consensus on this and not that we would know. CTE is determined after someone passes away, but that is the prevailing sentiment, that these traumatic head injuries, repeated head injuries, forced Brown down a path that leads us to him, on the show today.
One could argue, John, that he was in Dubai sort of hiding out or running from this potential criminal prosecution. He was extradited, and here he is. He's out on $25,000 bond, not a huge amount. Your take in terms of the charge and the bond, and is he a flight risk?
Attempted murder carries about, I think, 15 years in Florida. He's hired Mark Eiglarsh, who's a good friend. Mark knows the media. Mark and I have been doing this stuff on TV for 15, 20 years. And Mark, I think, had a victory in court, getting Antonio home detention, getting him a lower bond where he can work on his, case from outside. The other side of the coin is, look, the video's out there. You can see the fight. And no matter what somebody says about who was the aggressor initially and whether he was trying to get his jewelry stolen, what I see is Antonio, being clear from the fight and then getting a gun and going back to it. And that doesn't fit stand your ground. That doesn't fit self-defense. Once you relabel yourself as the aggressor and have a reputation, like Antonio, as being very aggressive, probably like they said, with some correlation to CTE and brain injury, but it's going to be a battle throughout this case.
Let's take a closer look at the incident, which was picked up on multiple social media platforms. So what happened leading up to, this is what happens leading up to this shooting. There's an altercation, you can see it on Twitch and X. Brown is in a fist fight. Multiple people are trying to jump him, and he says trying to get his jewelry. He's the victim right here. And then things do turn. He reaches into his pocket there, you see the freeze frame there, grabbing the firearm, and then he's seen running after the victims and firing the gun twice. The defense says his actions were self-defense, that this was basically self-defense. The alleged victim's violent behavior, stating Brown was attacked and acted within his legal rights. So is self-defense viable or not? I guess that's the case, and John just talked about it. Charlie, you know him, you were throwing to him as a quarterback, and what is, if you could characterize his mentality in terms of a competitor, a warrior type thing, how would you describe Antonio Brown mentally?
Well, I think anytime you're playing professional sports, you have to be mentally strong because of all the distractions that occur, whether that's on the field, off the field, or vice versa. So I think ultimately what he built on the field, you knew he was mentally tough, but ultimately what did that look like as it relates to, the circle that he had around him to help make sure that they were navigating him into the right perspective. And watching this video, obviously it is disturbing by any means. And I think it's something that ultimately you hope that your day gets to court. But of course, when you're a public figure, you're guilty until proven innocent. So we're seeing all of this swaying our opinion, but yet when he gets his day in court, he'll be able to tell his side of the story.
And do you think, Charlie, that, if let's say you're in a, he is a target, right? And as an NFL quarterback, I'm sure you felt it, where people, they recognize you, some people want an autograph, other people want to mess with you.
It happens all the time, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of a public figure. Yes, you get recognized. There are perks that come along with it, but yet on the backside, you lose your private life. But ultimately, as he was transitioning from the NFL to a music career, people still held him in that public light. And ultimately, sometimes your ego is at stake, or maybe you start believing in the persona that people are portraying for you, because I don't know Antonio as that particular person. I knew him those 3 years that I was there. He was at my house a lot with my wife, Latasha. He would come over and eat. We would fellowship, all of those good things. And ultimately that carried into what he was doing on the field. But what we're seeing now is not something that, I was accustomed to seeing at the early days.
Dan, how does a celebrity fare in court? Is it an advantage or a disadvantage typically?
I would say it's a mixed bag, but as Charlie mentioned with Antonio Brown, I think the court of public opinion is out on Antonio. You asked, how would you describe Antonio during his playing career? And I think Charlie is right, a warrior and all the normal characteristics of a football player. But in his post-playing career, and he's developed a very big social media personality, I would say he's erratic, he's unpredictable, and he's trying to, I guess, make a living on social media by standing out in probably not the best ways. So, I'm not sure that's going to help his case in court. Certainly the video does speak for itself, but people go in with the Antonio Brown's kind of baggage, and you could just look at the timeline of events from Antonio Brown dating back, 6-7 years, claiming to have been a victim of theft in the past. This is, I guess, somewhat of the same narrative for Brown, albeit probably the most serious charge he's ever been accused of. Certainly Brown's reputation does precede himself.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking on many levels. John, how does it seep into the courtroom, his struggles, the reaction to being jumped? One could argue that if you're hitting a bar and you go chase someone down and beat him up, that's fine, right? Ish. But he gets out the gun. That changes can the defense be nuanced enough to get some sympathy for Antonio in his mental state as he's leaving that event, and he is now jumped, and it is very jarring, and his reaction was his reaction.
My kids would call this glazing, but he hired the perfect attorney for that. Mark Eiglosh, is positive and it has a great reputation, and not even silver-tongued. He's legitimately a nice guy. And so he'll bring up and coach Antonio Brown to be the best Antonio Brown. Now, again, all the stuff like that jury selection is going to be nuts, because you've got Trump politics, you've got all the things down in South Florida that you've got to take out of the courtroom to just determine whether this was a fair self-defense case or not. And it's real tough when you're away from a situation and go back to it or shoot your way through it to really call that self-defense.
Yeah, we'll see it all play out. For now, he is out on bail. Again, that happened yesterday. He'll wear the ankle monitor. Charlie Batch and Dan Luss, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it. We're going to get a break. Still to come, how will the Massachusetts mother accused of killing her 3 kids present herself when she is back in court? We're digging deeper into the case against Lindsay Clancy. And
Robbie Tower had 68 penetrating wounds. Jennifer Tower had 79 penetrating stab wounds.
We're going to take a closer look at Devyn Tower. Broke down during the opening statement on the defense. The judge had to send the jury out. We saw that yesterday. How's that going to tip the scales, if at all?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
We're going to see Lindsay Clancy in court for the first time. That's our spotlight this morning. The mom, accused of murdering her kids before jumping out of a window herself, is due in court next week. Different from how we've previously seen her, which has been from the hospital.
Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them.
Heartbreaking. There you see, that's how she appeared in court previously. She was in a hospital bed, unable to really articulate anything. Now the defense is asking that this case be moved because of all of the pretrial publicity here. They don't think they'll get a fair trial in Plymouth, Massachusetts. She claims she was in psychosis and plans to argue a lack of criminal responsibility at trial. So what is going on here? What can we expect? Let's bring in criminal defense attorney Michael J. Brown and licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. Jamie, a mother doesn't just kill her 3 kids because she's having a bad day. And that's been, I think, it's very obvious to a lay person. Can you explain how this happens in other cases? And just how does a mother that has so much love for these kids get to this point?
Yeah, so I think clearly what you're dealing with here is some sort of psychosis that occurred. She did, for at least months prior to, report to her husband and reported to medical staff. She had facilitated her own inpatient stay. She had been saying that she was feeling extremely depressed, that she was feeling extremely anxious, that she was having suicidal thoughts, that she feared that she was going to hurt the kids. So she was making this known. She was seeking help. She was given a laundry list of medications to take, multiple benzodiazepines and other medications all at once, which is quite rare to be discharged on that many medications. But I think what you're seeing here was a psychotic episode for sure.
And Michael, from that standpoint, legally, what do we do? What does the law really do? Because a lot of times people are very dismissive about, they're claiming mental instability, or that. All right, there's a there here, and what should be done?
Yeah, Ted, we have, every state in the nation has an insanity defense, and the reason for that insanity defense is because that defendant cannot understand or did not understand at that moment in time the wrongfulness of their acts. So that's what they have to prove. And the defense asserts that defense. They have to prove that defense. And oftentimes the prosecutor has to disprove that beyond a reasonable doubt, depending upon the jurisdiction. So, yeah, the law has created that insanity defense for situations. This may very well fit into that type of situation. But you have to prove it, and there's a lot that goes into it. It includes the background of the defendant and their history. And oftentimes it's experts, and oftentimes it's the battle of the experts. The prosecutor will have their own expert who's going to generally oppose the defendant's expert. So it's a very intricate legal argument that a jury ultimately will have to decide.
And Dr. Jamie referenced this. Patrick Clance is going to be key in this. He spoke to the New Yorker, and he says there's no house anymore. There are no kids. All that's left is me and Lindsay. If I could go back in time, I'd have called McLean and said, take her away, lock the door, keep her in there for a year if you have to. She misses her kids, which I know sounds crazy to some people, but that is the reality. How important is it to build a forensic to go back and when Michael talks about the experts, how important is the reporting from the husband when you're trying to piece together this puzzle pre-murder, Doctor?
Very important, because, you know, the husband is the one who was around when all of this was occurring. But the one thing I will say is that when you're trying to get the history of somebody who has a history of postpartum depression and has had a history of suicidal thoughts and homicidal thoughts, one of the things to keep in mind where I think it gets a little bit muddy is a lot of times people who have these fixed beliefs or command hallucinations, they are, especially a mother of 3 children, they're very concerned that their child's going to get taken away from them. And, you know, as much as she wanted help, I wouldn't be surprised if she kept a lot of these things to herself out of fear, out of stigma, you know, and out of fear of being taken, of her children being taken away from her. So I think that it's important to get all of this background and the husband's take on this, but I think it's also important to consider what may not be known as well.
Michael, what other what else is there in this case? I know you're saying that, you know, prosecutors will have, which is true, an expert that's going to say hogwash, jury, she killed 3 kids. Really? I mean, every now and then a case comes around where you're like, okay, this lady was off her rocker and these kids are dead, and it sure seems like that on the outside. Is there ever a mechanism where prosecutors can say, listen, we get it, this lady needs to go to a mental institution and stay there until she can come out?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ted, because a lot of the times the public thinks, oh, you know, you got a not guilty by reason of insanity, and the person walks out the door. That's not what happens. And oftentimes, especially in New York State, when you're declared insane and not guilty by insanity, you can be in a mental institution longer than you would have been paroled for. But going back to your question, Ted, yeah, I mean, there are occasions when the prosecutor is in agreement. If the evidence is overwhelming that this is insanity and it's well established by the defendant's expert and the history, as the doctor said, of their mental disease, of their treatment, of their medications, of prior episodes and incidents. And now you have the prosecutor's expert who really spends maybe 5 or 6 hours doing their examination. There are times when they are concurring with the defendant's decision, and they're found not guilty by a plea of mental disease or defect or insanity, and the judge then remands them to a psychiatric facility. That does happen.
Here's the defense attorney in court basically saying, listen, this lady's in trouble.
We all know that this is an individual, as Rhonda knows from Dr. Ricard's letter, who is in dire medical condition. We all know that this woman is, as counsel concedes apparently, a danger to herself. I question whether she would ever make it to a trial. She's suicidal. She's extremely emotional. However, she's unable, and has been unable, to express any happiness or sadness or cry.
Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, does post something, an event like this after it's over, does an individual snap out of it and realize what they've done?
So if it is a psychotic episode and it is properly treated, which I think up until now it had not been, then yes, they can. But again, you know, if it's something that comes back, if it's a recurring episode, you know, they have to make sure that this isn't a bipolar disorder, you know, or something that triggered a bipolar disorder. So could it come back? Yes, particularly if it's not properly treated. I do think right now she is in a very delicate state. I think she, I would assume that she would try to harm herself again if you know, if given the chance to right now, especially knowing what happened and knowing the repercussions of what she's done.
Yeah, just a sad case all around. A mother is on trial and 3 beautiful little children are dead. And we'll see. She'll be in court, we expect, next week and continue to monitor it. Up next, more troubling behavior. This from a defendant, Devyn Michaels, killed his adoptive parents, breaks down during his murder trial. Is that going to affect anything? Plus, here's a live look at Kentucky. Former teacher Elena Barden expected to be sentenced for having sex with an incarcerated teen. This is a wild one. Stay with us.
This is the Court TV podcast.
The adopted son murder trial resumes shortly, and this morning we're wondering if the defendant's emotions in court will tip the scales. You could hear Devyn Tower crying as his lawyer detailed his troubled life before allegedly killing his adoptive parents, Jennifer and Robbie Tower. Crying so loud, the judge stopped the proceedings, sent the jury out, and told Tower needed to get it together.
I just excused the jury. It got to the point where the defendant, in crying and using Kleenex, was disrupting the jury trial. Mr. Tower, I won't allow that to continue, so take a moment, compose yourself, and we'll get started in about 5 or so minutes, okay?
How can the jurors ignore that? They can't. You know, they were sent out of the room because of it. It was obvious that the kid was breaking down as his lawyer detailed his very difficult childhood. He was in the Ukraine, lost his mother. He was a rambunctious, apparently, kid, and his dad put him up for adoption. Ended up with this nice couple in Florida, and now they're dead because he told investigators that he killed him. He just felt this rage and couldn't control it, went in there while they were sleeping, killed him with a knife, dropped the knife, got another knife, and finished the job. Licensed psychologist Dr. Jamie Zuckerman is still with us, criminal defense attorney Michael J. Brown, and criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney John Phillips. So he's crying for himself, right? Because he didn't break down, Dr. Jamie, during the state's opening when they detailed the vicious, brutal killings. He just sat there stoic. Then when he talks about himself, that's when he breaks down. What effect do you think the jury has? Is it gonna affect the jury at all? Will there be empathy?
I mean, you know, I think the situation itself is absolutely tragic. I think multiple systems failed this kid. Do I think that they'll have empathy for him? Maybe. Do I think it's going to sway a decision? No, I don't, because I question kind of what you just said. You know, is he crying because of his history in his life, or is he crying out of remorse for the heinous acts he committed? So I'm not quite sure about that. I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact.
Do you think he's crying because he feels sorry for himself, not for his dead parents, Doctor?
Maybe a combination of that with kind of hearing his history of his upbringing being, you know, told to a courtroom. I think those two things combined. I'm not sold on the fact that he's crying because he killed his parents.
Michael, the defense showed up before trial and said, listen, he wants to plead out. He'll plead to manslaughter and 40 years. The state said, no, thank you. We're going because we want him locked up for life. So here we are. We're at trial. And in the openings, the defense said, find him guilty of manslaughter. What's your overall take on how this incident, I guess, in court is going to play out? Will it, as we say, tip the scales?
It can't hurt, Ted. You know, the defense is doing the best with what they have, and they're conceding that he's responsible for the killing. And the issue really here is whether it's going to be a murder, which is premeditation. There's planning, and this is what he had planned to do, versus a manslaughter, which is, hey, I snapped. It was heat of passion, and I lost it. And as a result, I did this horrible act. So what you're looking at is somebody who's displaying emotion. It can't hurt. It can only benefit him. He's not coming across as a cold-hearted killer in front of a jury. He's crying, and they want to portray that he's crying because he realizes he did something horrific. And again, the argument is he did it horrific, but it wasn't planned. And the whole play here is for that much lesser charge of manslaughter.
John Phillips, this defendant, unlike the mom in Massachusetts, I think has a certain fear factor for the general public and the jury. His history may not actually help him in the end of the day when the ultimate choice for jurors is, do we want this guy walking free in Florida? Your thoughts on that?
as a Florida resident with 3 children, I don't really want him, passing my kids in a free society. He did this. The evidence is clear he did this. It's not whether he did it, it's why he did it. And it's a super, super sad tale of, a teenager who killed his adopted parents, immigrated through adoption from the Ukraine at 14. It's a horrible tale. Lord knows what abuse he went through to get here. But, the criminal justice system has a purpose. And as much sympathy and empathy as we can all have, you do murder your adoptive parents. And I think jurors, while they got to, not golden rule this thing and put themselves in those shoes, will certainly have sympathy and empathy for those parents. Even though sympathy in the jury instructions is told to be put aside.
Yeah, and the viciousness of this crime, Dr. Zuckerman, is a factor in the legal sense, but also in the makeup of this individual, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. This was there was a lot of rage, a lot of hate. The manner in which his adopted parents were murdered was horrific and very gruesome. And this isn't the first time that there's been domestic violence type situations. There's been multiple times that the police were called for, physical violence that he committed. So what you normally see is this escalation in violence, and I think that's exactly what we saw.
And do people like this who have issues, he's going to prison, let's face it. Even the defense wants him to go for 40 years. Can you morph out of this as you age, doctor?
With his history and with the trauma that he's likely had, and we probably only have scratched the surface with what we know, with being in an orphanage in Ukraine. With proper treatment, proper medication, could he come out of this? I really don't think so. I think this is something that's more ingrained in his personality structure. There are medications and strategies, obviously, that can help regulate your emotions, but this, I think, is something different. I think this is more of a personality construct that we're dealing with. Final word, Michael Brown, does he go down with murder, or is he or will manslaughter work here?
I think, Ted, he's going to have to take the stand. I think he's going to have to sell this to a jury, and I think he's going to have to put his best foot forward and tell this jury how he didn't mean to do this. He lost it. He snapped, cry on the stand, display emotion, and that's his only way, I think, of getting that reduced conviction.
We shall see. They'll be back at it later today, and we'll monitor that case. Thank you, all three. Enjoy the rest of the Thursday, and we will see you again soon. We'll get a break here. Court TV Live is over, or is next. Opening statements is over. Before we go, though, we want to make a note here. It was 3 years ago today that 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered inside their home in Moscow, Idaho. Their killer, Brian Kohlberger, serving multiple life sentences. Let's take a moment to remember. Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
That's all for this episode of Opening Statements, my friends. I'm your host, Julie Grant, and it's been great being with you. On this show, I am calling out any pants on fire moments in our big trials and true crime stories, and I want you to come along with me. Opening Statements is live every weekday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern on Court TV. Thank you for downloading this episode. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. You can watch past shows anytime you like on CourtTV.com.